I wasn't on the list. That's the first thing the young lieutenant said when I stepped up to the check-in table at Fort Reynolds Hall. He glanced at my invitation, which was blank, and gave me a tight smile, the kind that says, "You don't belong here. This event is for family and honored guests only," he added. His voice wasn't rude, just firm, practiced. I looked past him into the glittering hall, where gold trim lined the archways and a slideshow of commendations flickered on screens. I caught a glimpse of Hermie's sister, Talia, standing in full dress uniform, shaking hands with the general staff like she was born for it. Of course she was on the stage. Of course I wasn't on the list. I should have left. I came only because of a promisone I whispered at a graveside 3 years ago. If she ever earns that pin, I'll be there, even if I have to stand in the shadows. So I turned to go, and then I heard it. "General Stanton?" The voice cut through the air like a flag snapping to attention. I turned. A commander in full formal blues stepped out of the side corridor and came to a full stop. Then, with deliberate clarity and a salute so sharp the air stiffened, he said, "Welcome, General Brielle Stanton." Every head turned. Every whisper died. And for the first time in 15 years, my name wasn't followed by silence. My family has always worshipped the uniform, but only when it was worn the way they approved. My father was a decorated colonel, the kind who stood ramrod straight at the breakfast table and corrected your salute before you could say good morning. My mother, all pearls and posture, called herself an officer's wife, even after retirement, like it was a second skin. My sister, Talia, was their pride from the moment she could hold a toy rifle. She walked, talked, and even breathed like a future general. They called her our rising star. Me? I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the questioner. When I chose to commission into Army intelligence instead of infantry or public affairs, they nodded politely but never looked proud. I wasn't glamorous. I didn't give speeches. I worked in shadows, behind locked doors and under code names. And when the operation in Kandahar went wrong, when 6 lives were lost, and someone needed to take the fall, I didn't speak out. I accepted the sealed reprimand and moved on. But my family didn't. To them, failure, even unspoken, undeserved failure, was a stain. They stopped inviting me to holidays. My mother told people I was on assignment overseas, even when I lived 2 hours away. And when my father passed from a sudden stroke 5 years ago, I arrived at the funeral to find my name missing from the program. There wasn't even a seat left in the front row. That night, I stood alone in the cemetery long after everyone had left, boots soaked through from the wet grass. And that's when my grandfather appeared, General Edward Stanton, retired. He'd been silent for years, a ghost in our family photos, more myth than man. But not to me. "I never stopped watching you, Bree," he said, his voice gravel and thunder. "You did the hard thing, the quiet thing. That's what leadership really is." He handed me a folded no-tone he said he'd written long ago and updated over time. It wasn't a will, it was a promise. "If your sister ever makes rank," he told me, "go. Even if they don't want you there, go. Because one day, someone's going to say your name out loud, and they're going to say it with honor." That note stayed in my locker through 3 deployments, 2 promotions, and more sleepless nights than I can count. I never showed it to anyone. Not even when I made Brigadier General at 36. Not when I pinned my 2nd star last year under classified orders during a joint task force ceremony no one outside of 3 agencies could attend. Not even when the president shook my hand and said, "We need more like you." Because it wasn't about titles, or medals, or who claps for you. It was about whether someone remembers you at all. Talia certainly didn't. The last time we spoke, she told me flatly, "Your work embarrasses Mom. No one even knows what you do." She laughed after, like it was a joke. But it wasn't. They liked their daughters shiny, not silent. So I disappeared. I stopped trying. I let them cut me out like a name from a seating chart. Until the invitation came. Not to me, but posted on the base board. Lieutenant Colonel Talia Stanton to be recognized in a formal ceremony at Fort Reynolds Hall, open to select guests and press. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a billboard. But I remembered the promise. And I showed up. Not for Talia. Not for my mother. For him. For the man who said I'd be seen. I stood outside that hall, breathing through my nerves, invisible by design and now invisible by default. And then someone said my name. Not like it was a problem. Not like it was an afterthought. But like it meant something. And that's when everything changed. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles in when your name is never mentioned again, not in dinner conversations, not in holiday cards, not even in whispered guilt. At first, I thought it was temporary, that one day my mother would call, that Talia might send a birthday text, that someone in the family would at least ask where I'd gone. But silence became the norm, a blank space where belonging used to be. Meanwhile, I kept working. After Kandahar, I transferred into cyber and psychological operations. I found patterns no one else did. Dismantled enemy communication grids. Mapped threat ecosystems before anyone could name them. I stopped being a soldier people recognized and became the strategist they depended on. But that kind of work lives in the shadows. You don't get to take photos with generals. You don't get parades. You get results. And more clearance levels. By 34, I was briefing cabinet-level advisors under an alias. By 36, I was promoted to brigadier general in a windowless room with 7 people and no cameras. The file was marked restricted honor. No public record. Not even my name on the wall. And I was okay with that. Mostly. Because the work mattered. We stopped attacks before they reached American soil. We saved lives quietly, cleanly, without headlines. But the silence outside of duty hours, that was harder. I remember walking past a Mother's Day brunch 2 years ago, seeing 3 generations laughing over pancakes. I wasn't jealous. I was unmoored. Like I came from a house that had all the language of love but none of the substance. Even on the rare occasion I crossed paths with someone from my past, they acted like I was a memory. "Weren't you Talia's sister?" they'd say, as if I were a supporting character who wandered off script. Even my former commanding officer, Colonel Greerance, joked during a briefing. "Didn't know you were real, Stanton. Heard more about your sister than I've seen of you." I just smiled and kept flipping slides. In the military, you learn to live with ghosts, both the ones you've lost and the version of yourself you bury for duty. But every now and then, the girl I used to be would tap on the walls of my chest and whisper, "Do they know? Do they even care that you're still out here?" And I'd think of him. Of my grandfather. He wrote me every few months handwritten letters like old officers do. Never emotional, never dramatic. Just a simple, "Proud of you, Brie. Hold the line." Then, 3 years ago, his letters stopped. I found out he'd passed a week after the funeral. Not from family, from a staff sergeant who handled interdepartmental mail. They didn't tell me. Didn't invite me. Didn't even leave a note. When I reached out to my mother, she replied with 2 lines. "We assumed you were deployed. Besides, it was a small service." Small. Like the loss didn't deserve space, like I wouldn't have crossed continents to be there. I didn't write back. I didn't yell or explain or beg. I folded that silence into the stack of other forgotten things and moved forward. But I never let go of that note from Grandpa. The one that said, "If she makes rank, go. Even if they leave you off the list. Even if they pretend you're no one. Go." I kept it pressed between my transfer orders for years. It reminded me that someone once saw Minot from my uniform, not from my utility, but for who I was underneath the duty. So when I saw the announcement about Talia's ceremony on the base bulletin board, I paused. I stared at it for a long time. And then I circled the date in ink. Not because I thought they'd changed, but because I had. The morning of the ceremony, I dressed like a ghost. Full formal blues. No ribbons. No rank on the outer coat. No insignia on the cover. Just a plain uniform and my grandfather's old watch tucked into my inner pocket, the one he wore at his final change of command. I arrived early, parked 2 blocks away, and walked alone under a gray sky that matched the quiet inside me. The Fort Reynolds Hall was dressed to impress. Flags flanked the marble steps, and inside, a brass quintet was already warming up. Staffers in crisp service uniforms buzzed around with clipboards and camera crews. At the front, a check-in table manned by a young lieutenant barely 25, fresh face, polite, and utterly uninterested in making exceptions. "I'm here for the Stanton ceremony," I said. He scrolled. "Name?" "Brielle Stanton." His brows knit together. "Stanton? Relation to Lieutenant Colonel Talia Stanton?" "Sister," I said. He paused, then offered a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list." He gestured to the crowd behind me. "This event is closed to invited guests only." I nodded once. No argument. I'd expected this. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse through the archway. Talia stood under the spotlights, posing with our mother. My mother, hair perfectly curled, pearls glinting, hands clasped tight like she was holding court. They looked so proud, like nothing was missing. I exhaled and turned toward the exit, and that's when I heard it. A door creaked open somewhere off to the left, followed by sharp, purposeful footsteps. Then a voice out loud, not commanding, but unmistakably firm. "General Stanton?" I turned. A man in full dress blues stood at attention. He wore the stars of a 3-star commander, his posture perfect, his salute already rising. The young lieutenant at the check-in table froze. Everyone near the entrance stopped talking. The commander didn't hesitate. "Welcome, General Brielle Stanton," he said. Loud, clear. Salute held steady. And in that instant, the entire lobby turned. Conversations died. Phones lowered. Even the flag outside seemed to catch a stillness in the air. I returned the salute slowly, deliberately. "Thank you, Commander," I said. He stepped forward and extended a hand. "It's an honor. I've read your work. We've never met, but your briefing on the Black Ridge cyber breach saved us 6 months of damage control. You changed the game." I nodded once, quietly. Behind us, the lieutenant's mouth parted slightly. I didn't turn back. Another officer stepped out from the corridor and whispered something to the commander, eyes darting to me. The commander smiled. "Would you like to come inside, General? I believe your seat is waiting." "I wasn't assigned one," I said evenly. He gave a small, amused nod. "That's about to change." As we stepped through the doorway into the main hall, the sound of conversations halting was almost physical. Talia saw me first. She stiffened. My mother blinked like she'd seen a ghost. I walked beside the commander down the center aisle as officers stepped aside to let us pass. Whispers trailed behind us like loose threads. "That's Brielle Stanton? General? I thought she—" We reached the front. The commander motioned to a seat directly across from the podium. "Front row. Reserved." He gave me a final nod. "It's about time." I sat. Talia still hadn't moved. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. And I knew, in that moment, the script she'd memorized all her life had just unraveled. The ceremony resumed, but the air had changed. You could feel it like someone had cracked open a window in a room that had been closed too long. The speakers returned to the podium, reading citations, calling names. Applause followed each one, polite and measured. Talia stepped forward to receive her pin, her posture textbook perfect. The general affixed the silver oak leaf to her lapel, shook her hand, smiled for the cameras. She smiled too, but it didn't reach her eyes. Afterward, as guests mingled, she found me near the outer courtyard. Her walk was slower than usual, like she hadn't decided yet who she needed to be. "General," she said, trying to smile. "That was unexpected." I met her gaze. "Likewise." She looked down, then back up. "Why didn't you say anything all these years?" "Because no one asked," I replied. She shifted. "We thought you left." "No, I was still here, just not where you wanted to see me." Talia's voice dropped. "You knew about today?" "I saw the posting. Public bulletin board." Third floor. Mom didn't invite you because… She hesitated. She said you wouldn't come. She didn't ask. There was a silence between us, thick and raw, too fragile for blame, too early for forgiveness. She folded her arms. You outrank me now. I've outranked you for a while, I said, without cruelty. Talia let out a small breath. I didn't know. I know. She glanced back toward the hall where our mother was still holding court, speaking to dignitaries like nothing had happened. She's going to be furious, Talia muttered. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. She looked back at me. Then why did you come? I hesitated, then answered honestly, because someone once told me to. Someone who believed I'd be seen eventually. Her eyes flicked to the pocket watch chain barely visible inside my coat. Grandpa! I nodded. For the first time that day, her face softened. He used to ask about you. I know, he wrote. I should have… She trailed off. I should have said something. I'm not here for an apology, Talia. She looked at me, unsure. Then what are you here for? I let the silence settle before I answered. To make peace with the part of me that thought I had to stay invisible to survive. She swallowed hard. I didn't come to take your day. You earned this. But so did I. She nodded slowly. Yeah, you did. Another pause. Then she said, I always thought you looked down on me. I almost laughed. No. I was too busy trying not to disappear. I looked up to you, at least when I was younger. I studied her. You stopped. I didn't know who you were anymore. And now? She didn't answer. But she held my gaze longer than she ever had before. Maybe we start there, I said quietly. Talia nodded. Then she reached out tentative, slow. I didn't take her hand. Not yet. Some wounds need scar tissue before they can hold weight. But I didn't pull away either. We stood there, side by side, two women in the same uniform, shaped by different wars. Behind us, the band resumed playing. And somewhere between the notes, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not reunion, but recognition. It was enough. 3 days later, I returned to Joint Base Carson. Nothing had changed, at least not on the surface. The same low hum of servers, the same rust-colored scuff marks down the hallway leading to Intel Briefing Room 4. My nameplate still sat crooked on my office door. My inbox still overflowed with unread encrypted files. But inside me, something had finally settled. For the first time in years, I didn't walk these halls with a knot in my chest. I didn't brace for dismissal or wonder whether I belonged. Because I had seen the moment I was no longer invisible, and more than that, I had recognized myself in it. That changes a person. Not into someone new. Just someone whole. That night, I unlocked the wooden box I'd kept tucked beneath layers of old uniforms. Inside it was the folded note Grandpa had given me nearly a decade ago. The creases were deep, the corners frayed, but the words still held. One line stood out more than the rest. When they finally say your name, make sure you still recognize it. And I did. Not because I'd climbed the ranks. Not because a commander had said it aloud in front of hundreds. But because I knew the cost of silence, and I chose to carry my name anyway. I chose to stand, even when it meant standing alone. Talia hasn't called since that day. Neither has my mother. Maybe they're too proud. Maybe they're too ashamed. Maybe both. It doesn't matter. The validation I waited for wasn't theirs to give. Forgiveness is strange. Sometimes it's loud, full of declarations and reunions. But most days, it's quite a choice you make when you stop needing someone to feel your pain before you let it go. Yesterday, one of my junior officers, a bright-eyed second lieutenant, caught up to me after a strategy session. He hesitated, then said, "Ma'am, I saw what happened at Fort Reynolds. That was the first time I ever saw someone get honored without demanding it." I nodded. That's the only kind that lasts. Later that evening, I walked alone to the Intelligence Memorial Wall. There's a plaque there, near the bottom corner, easy to miss unless you're looking for it. It bears the name of a woman whose mission I once greenlit. She saved lives that day and gave her own in the process. No one at HQ talks about her. Her file is still sealed. But I remember. I straightened her frame and stood at attention. No one saw me. No one needed to. Because some legacies don't get parades. They get remembered by the ones who know what it means to serve without being seen. And when they say my name, know if they say it. General Brielle Stanton. I don't flinch. I don't look around, wondering if they mean someone else. I stand. Because I am her. I always was. Now, finally, so is the world.